Hi there, my name is Jeff Evely. I'm the Ops Sgt Major with Veterans for Freedom. Back with you now. I have a very special panel of guests with me here today. To my left on the screen is Mike Rood. Below me is Alex Cabana, and then diagonally is Sean Arnston. And the topic tonight is Mefloquine, and in particular Mefloquine injury. And we kind of want to tease out some of the parallels between what happened with Mefloquine back in the 90s and what's going on with the mRNA shot right now. So we brought on a few guys who had some experience with Mefloquine in the 90s and throughout the 2000s. We were just having a conversation before we came on, and I'm not even sure if I actually took it or not. But I would have been in Afghanistan apparently at the time when it was optional, which was 2009. So it's a really it's one of these topics that I'm not fully conversant in. So I'm really looking forward to being taken to school by some of these gentlemen. And I have a few things lined up here to kind of give the history. But before we do that, I thought we would just start with some basic introductions. Maybe give us a quick service history and let us know, when you took Mefloquine and what your experience has been like since that time. And I think we'll start probably just to my left with Mike there, because I know Mike has been pretty active and really advocating for awareness around this topic. So I'm sure he's got lots of info to share with us. And so I'll hand that over to Mike. Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead and take it away.
All right. My name's Mike Rood. I served 28 and a half years in the military, did 22 and a half with the Reg Force, and served with the Canadian Airborne Regiment, went to Somalia with them. And with 3 VP, I went to Bosnia and then went to Afghanistan in 05-06. I've been retired since 2016.
Okay. Thanks for coming on here, Mike, and thanks for your service, brother. I really appreciate everything you've been doing. I've been tracking as much as I can track anything these days, the Rude Awakening tour, and it's really great to see. So thanks for that too. And Sean, why don't you go ahead, buddy, and give us the kind of the wave tops there, the service highlights, and tell us a little bit about your story with Mefloquine.
I'm Sean Arnson. I was in 3 PPCLI for 6.5 years. I deployed to Afghanistan off Apollo 02, and I was made aware of Mefloquine through another gentleman named Dave Bona. Realized that I had become injured, that I was injured from it, and then started to advocate with Mike at the provincial level in Alberta to some strong avail in May of this year. Or when was that? Maybe April of this year?
March 14th.
Oh, March 14th. The Alberta government unanimously passed Bill 205, which is the official recognition of quinism in the province as an injury. So
nice. And Alex, same thing. Quick service history, and give us the highlights of your experience with Mefloquine.
Yeah, my name's Alex Cabana. I enrolled in 2005, and I was medically released in 2020, 15th of March 2020, just before all of this started. Medically released 3B and combat engineer, 2CR engineer world, and my last job was at CJOC and back and forth between Germany, etc. My experience with Mefloquine was in 2010 with Roto 309 and Apathina.
Right. I would have been there on Apathina as well in 2009, 2010. I came back in January of 2010, actually. So, small world. We probably crossed paths or near miss anyway. So I thought what we would do here is just for anybody who's kind of just new to this topic, we kind of start with some of the basics here. So I'm just going to give you guys a share screen. go. Okay, so this is just the Wikipedia article on Mefloquine, just to kind of give us the basics here. Mefloquine, sold under the brand name Lariam, among others, is a medication used to prevent or treat malaria. When used for prevention, it is typically started before potential exposure and continued for several weeks after potential exposure. It can be used to treat mild or moderate malaria, but is not recommended for severe malaria. It is taken by mouth. Common side effects include vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, sleep disorders, and rash. Serious side effects include potentially long-term mental health problems such as depression, hallucinations, and anxiety, and neurological side effects such as poor balance, seizures, and ringing in the ears. It is therefore not recommended in people with a history of mental health problems or epilepsy. It appears to be safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Mefloquine was developed by the United States Army in the 1970s and came into use in the mid-1980s. It is on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. It is available as a generic medication. So I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit because it does mention a little bit with the Canadian Armed Forces here. It says by 1992, UNITAF, Canadian soldiers were being prescribed the drug en masse. So that would have been right around the time of Somalia in '93. Was when that deployment took place, and also we have in 2016, the Canadian Surgeon General, Brigadier General Hugh Colin McKay, told a parliamentary committee that faulty science supported the assertion that the drug has indelible noxious side effects. An expert from Health Canada named Barbara Raymond told the same committee that the evidence she had read failed to support the conclusion of indelible side effects. Canadian soldiers who took Mefloquine when deployed overseas have claimed they have been left with an ongoing mental health problems. So yeah, that's kind of the crux of the matter, I think, is that on one side of the issue here, we have people that are suffering. What they mean by indelible side effects is that they just don't go away. These are permanent injuries, and a lot of them manifest psychologically, psychiatrically. So, but the government seems to be taking the position that there's no link between Mefloquine and I think what we're now sort of tacitly calling quinism. Is that about right, guys?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so here's the disease that we're trying to prevent. It's a real problem in places like Africa. This is why the British didn't really colonize in Africa. It's a big part of it anyway. It's because as soon as they step off the boat, they pretty much die of malaria. Yeah, I just want to do a quick overview on this thing here. It's just like a bug, okay? It's a single-celled organism in the Plasmodium group, which is just a germ, basically. It's a protozoan, I think, so it has an organized nucleus, but this is kind of the most severe side effect that we can see coming out of quinism. It's called progressive multifacial leukoencephalopathy, is a rare and often fatal viral disease characterized by progressive damage or inflammation of the white matter of the brain at multiple locations. It is caused by the JC virus, which is normally present and kept under control by the immune system. The JC virus is harmless except in cases of weakened immune systems. In general, PML has a mortality of 30 to 50% in the first few months, and those who survive can be left with varying degrees of neurological disabilities. So they kind of go into a little bit more here about the immunodeficiency, acquired AIDS, immunosuppressive medications, including chemotherapy. So this is all kind of ringing familiar, I think, right now with some of what we've been hearing about longer-term side effects coming out of the mRNA therapies. Do you guys want to weigh in on anything I've mentioned here so far? Did I pretty much characterize the position that we're in right now in terms of where the veterans are and the government's position? Is that about right? Okay. So this is from a town hall, and Mike, I think you stood up at this one. You look a little hairier in this picture, but this is kind of just after you spoke at a town hall, and this is The lawyer who's in charge of, what's the word again, guys? It's not a class action, but you're all parties to what?
Mass tort.
Mass tort. Okay, and he's going to explain it here, but it's basically, it's like a class action, but everybody can kind of take their own individual settlements. Is that about right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here's a little bit of the video for you.
The legal action alleges the government has and continues to, on both an individual and systemic level, willfully deny and conceal the risks posed by Mefloquine.
What's your biggest legal challenge when it comes to taking on the Canadian government?
They're going to argue this is PTSD. This isn't from Mefloquine.
You're going to have to prove that the effects are caused by Mefloquine and not PTSD.
That's right. Now, there's going to be overlap, but there are telltale signs of Mefloquine toxicity PTSD does not have. Tinnitus is one. The gastrointestinal issues is another. The types of dreams could be another.
The drug may be marketed under the brand name Lariam, but Dr. Remington Nevin, a world expert on Mefloquine toxicity with Johns Hopkins University in the US, has another name for it.
You call it a horror movie in a pill.
I call it a horror movie in a pill for good reason, because the effects of this drug you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. But this would be a big issue scientifically.
Dr. Nevin meets regularly with veterans like these, sharing his decade of research. He's been called as an expert witness in lawsuits in the US, has testified before the British Parliament, and is the lead medical expert in this mass tort against the Canadian government.
What does the science say about Mefloquine toxicity?
Mefloquine is a neurotoxicant. We know that this drug injures and potentially even kills cells in the central nervous system.
Is it your medical belief that Mefloquine can cause permanent or long-lasting effects on the brain?
Yes, Mefloquine does cause permanent injury to the central nervous system in some individuals.
So far, some 3,000 veterans have expressed an interest in joining the mass tort. 900 have already signed their names to it, accusing the very government they were prepared to die in combat for of poisoning them. Richard Schumann is one of them.
Okay, I think we can move on here. So this was a kind of an issue that people highlighted in Somalia as well. So they were taking Mefloquine in Somalia, and there were reports of things like bad dreams, night terrors, people getting up screaming, and suicidality. And I think there was even one fatality, because there were multiple, I suppose, presumably negligent discharges, and there was one fatality over there as well. And for those who aren't too familiar with the Somalia affair, that was basically when there was a Somalian boy, Ariel Sharon, who was beaten to death over the course of a night on a deployment in Somalia, and it became the subject of a public inquiry. And this here is the guy who was kind of the ringleader in the whole thing. It's his wife, and she seems to be of the position that Mefloquine played a role in, I guess, what you would call his psychosis. So let's have a listen to what she's got to say.
Well, the biggest reason is our daughter and our family and our legacy from here on in. It has to be rewritten. It has to tell the truth. I just recently found out that our high school here teaches Native Studies as well. One of the topics they discuss is Mefloquine Maj. And I wonder just what we're teaching our children, because the truth has not been told yet. And that's my job, I feel. I can't let it go until that's done and we have some closure. He's left with severe brain damage. It's like a small child, has to be monitored all the time, 24-hour care, spends most of his time in a veterans hospital or at his mother's, and that's his life now. But should and when I win this, he's going to be the first person I go and tell, whether he knows or not, you know.
And what are you going to tell him?
I'm going to tell him that the truth got told. I'm going to tell him that the world knows how this thing happened, why he changed, why he became the infamous, notorious murderer of of a teen in Somalia. Why did it happen? No one condones that, not ever. And I have to say that every time. I live and breathe this thing. 25 years later, I still think of Shade in a row. I still think that that kid could have had a life. I just said, that's it. I'm going to the hill. And Dave said, I'm going too. And everyone else has bought on to the idea that we all need to stand there united and tell the world what this drug has done. Tell the world about the illegal drug trial done to these soldiers in Somalia. Tell the world how their 1 in 11,000 number they say is affected by Mefloquine is really more like 1 in a handful. These veterans will tell you what they go through. It's horrible. I don't even, but when we get to that hill, we're going to be heard. And the government's not going to shut us down this time. We have too many people on our side. And every country except Canada has banned this drug. Canada needs to buy on. And the only reason they don't is because they don't want to face the Somalia affair. It's time it was dealt with. Reopen the Somali inquiry. Let the chips fall where they may. Let the truth be told. And the charges laid where they should be. Then we'll be on our way to healing and healing other families as well.
Okay. And so now this is kind of...
Tonight, a WUSA 9 original that could
guys.
impact more than 1 million Americans. It's about a prescription drug given to service members, Peace Corps volunteers, federal employees, and world travelers.
Stupid autoplay. Okay, so here's kind of where it's at more recently. This is from 2018. So not as up to date as you guys are, but anyway, there's a new push here to ban Mefloquine in the Canadian military.
Last summer, a retired soldier named Hervé Blois showed up at my house with a file full of reports and a very poignant story. The report showed that Mefloquine, an anti-malaria drug that was taken by Canadian soldiers in 1990s, actually was having some very bad permanent side effects that had not been known before. Hervé suffered from those, and he and a group of soldiers are getting together asking the government for an apology and for some help in dealing with these side effects. You may recall that this was the drug that came to prominence in 1993 when the fateful Somalia mission happened. In that case, 2 Canadian soldiers beat to death a Somali teenager, and many thought that the drug Mefloquine was implicated in that. It causes hallucinations, paranoia, nightmares, insomnia, especially under conditions of stress. The soldiers complained, rightly so, that they were not administered the drug properly. There was no individual assessment of whether they could tolerate it, and nobody monitored the side effects. They're in a very big fight to get the government to move on this. And in one other piece of it, I managed to track down one of the most elusive soldiers, Kyle Brown, who was charged and convicted with murder for his role in the beating death of the Somali teen. He's relived the trauma of those events in Somalia, but he agreed to talk because he too wants to join the fight to get something of help from the Canadian government. I hope you find these stories poignant and significant. On the weekend, I'm Sheila Pratt from the Edmonton Journal. Okay, so that's kind of the broad strokes, folks. That's the history that kind of brought us here today. So I kind of wanted to go back and focus on something that the lawyer was saying there from the lawsuit, and it seems to me like he has a pretty good point there. I don't know anybody who just has PTSD who experiences things like tinnitus. Nightmares maybe, but not hallucinations, you know, and it almost sounds like the kinds of nightmares being described are borderline, I think, hallucinations, because they sound to me to be so vivid. So what seems to be the government's response to that tack that you guys are taking, that we can distinguish between quinism and PTSD by the symptoms of things like tinnitus, ringing in the ears, and the hallucinations. Sean, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. When I first heard about Mefloquine, I started to speak to a lot of my online friends. I had a large online audience of veterans. So Americans, Brits, I've spoken to a few Australian soldiers, a Belgique soldier, an Irish soldier. And let's say the four of us were in a vehicle and got hit by an IED.
Okay.
None of us would have the same triggers. And what I found was that every one of these people, different service, different socioeconomic background, different country, have the exact same symptoms.
Right.
We all got gastrointestinal issues.
Mm-hmm.
We all got tinnitus, and we all got a sleeping pattern that's, you can't sleep on your back. You got to sleep on your side. You wake up, you roll over, sleep on the other side. Night sweats. And that for me was and then I actually phoned Remington Nevin on at like 9 a.m. on a Saturday
Mm-hmm.
after my med relief session.
Oh, yeah.
And he answered the phone. And then I asked him some pretty direct questions. I said, this is the legal things that I went through after taking Mefloquine, and sent him my med records. And, you know, he's diagnosed me with quinism. So that's where the PTSD for me doesn't really overlap. And then the other thing is, like, I don't feel I experienced a large amount of trauma.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I was at Tarnac Farms. You know, we got blown up, did some combat air assaults, and walked around the desert with heavy shit. But I think my knees and my ankles are more hurt from that shit than my brain is. And speaking to other people that were not combat arms trades, cooks, mechanics, people that never left the wire, they got all these issues. So it's like, based on that, Dr. Remington Nevin's diagnosis, like, I don't think PTSD is 100% a cause of a lot of these issues that Canadian soldiers are facing, specifically the suicide endemic we have, right?
Right. And I often point out here that, was it the 21 push-up challenge that we were doing a few years ago to raise awareness for PTSD?
22,
something like that, yeah. Excuse me. And I often point out that, you know, even in the study that came up with that number of 22 suicides, I think, per day in the United States, the thing was that study itself didn't draw a connection between PTSD and suicide. The correlation with suicide is depression, and that's kind of the dirty little secret that we have in the military, is that we have a higher rate of depression in the ranks than in the general population. So yeah, that's I get what you're saying here, because it just doesn't seem to map, you know, well with the PTSD thing. And just to clarify, do you have a diagnosis of PTSD as well? Do you mind me asking?
Yeah, for sure. I got a pension, DVA pension for it.
Okay, yeah.
But like I said, you know, like, Alex and Mike and myself have the same symptoms.
Right.
3 different tours. Like, how is that possible? How can you say it's trauma?
Right. Yeah, no, I think I got it too. And just the way you're sort of describing your own experience, it sounds like, because I know that everybody kind of copes a little bit differently too. And when you're on deployment and you're in a stressful environment like that, or even when you're exposed to something traumatic, a lot of people are kind of wired in a way, you know, that they're a little better able to cope with it. And maybe that was just because it sounds to me like you're saying you don't think that your symptoms would have been that severe if it was PTSD alone. Like, you don't think?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, right on.
Like, I wouldn't be. I think based on how long it's gone on, how much training in PTSD and etc. that I have and that I've done, I would feel that it would be like, if you were a paramedic or a firefighter, it would be in remission, and you would start to live a better quality of life. Where, you know, if you're treating PTSD and you have quinism, some of the tools may work, but they ain't gonna fix it.
Right.
So for a time being, you'll start to have improvement in quality of life. You'll start to feel better, and then boom, you'll just lose your shit one day, and you'll be like, "What the fuck? I go to AA, I go to do all this stuff," and then that, you know, hurts your mental health more, because now you're like, you know, we're all soldiers. We're used to a high standard. We keep our lives to a high standard, essentially.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck, man, how am I not passing these POs? Why am I not able to succeed with all this knowledge on PTSD?
Mm-hmm.
And I would find too, when I first got diagnosed in 2003, a lot of the peer support was either domestic abuse survivors, car accident survivors, paramedics, firefighters, people that didn't take Mefloquine. And I would sit and listen to these like sort of like AA meetings, right? And I'm like, holy fuck, I'm way crazier than these people. Like I don't think like them. So there was this, and then later, a few years later, somebody said, maybe it's a brain injury because of your proximity to the bomb in Tarnack Farms. And I was like, maybe, but I don't think so. I'm not going to buy that one. And then I was Christian McEachern actually in like about 2012 said, you took Mefloquine, that's what's wrong with you. And I at that time said, man, you're crazy. It can't be. And then years later, again, just not being able to have a better quality of life, always relapsing into this madness, right? Like it's the only way to, like, Mefloquine rage and scaring everyone around me. But once I found out what it was, talked to Dave Bona, and you manage the injury appropriately. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm 100% normal, but I got a better quality of life.
But it is
I don't
treatable.
lose it and snap like I used to.
It is treatable and
I
manageable.
think it is. Yeah, I think it's awareness is key, right? Like avoiding the stressors to, your the part of your brain that receives information. So avoiding vestibular overwhelmment. So a lot of driving, concerts, those things.
Got it.
Busy places where there's lots of peripheral movement. If you avoid those things, I find that I can manage the quinism better.
Okay, right on. And it sounds like you're sensitive to sensory overload, kind of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And
because someone will play music in the background. Sometimes I'm like, shut that fucking noise off. Like I will go and get aggressive, because it's like, and now I can't think.
Yeah. And aggression is a symptom of PTSD as well. But some of the stuff that I find probably the most interesting is you mentioned like the gastrointestinal issues. And I wasn't even thinking about that in terms of something that might be a permanent lasting effect. But Alex, I think I'd like to get your thoughts on this now too. In terms of like the difference, because the difference between PTSD and quinism, have you found like, first of all, you're in the lawsuit as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess I'm just trying to maybe get some idea as to what position the government is taking with respect to, the argument being put forth here that we have a host of other symptoms that don't come along with PTSD that seem to be present in people who took Mefloquine. What's the response to that? Do you have any understanding of that?
Well, from my understanding, based on the email correspondence I've received with HSH, is that the government is postponing, and they've brought it down to the Superior Court in order to bring Larium to the forefront to allow them to be sued. So they were given immunity, kind of like what we're seeing today.
Right.
And Mike can correct me on this, but just my general understanding that they've been given immunity, and now the government brought it down to the Superior Court in order to bring Larium into the fold for blame. Now, that's obviously a stall tactic, but the issue remains. The similarities of between PTSD and quinism are so similar that I've brought this up with my like I said, I was medically released on the 15th of March 2020. Prior to that, I brought that up with psychologists, psychiatrists, everyone, my MO, my CDU, and I brought up Mefloquine, and of course, CF Health Services would never comment on that, but VAC will not in Canada. The Veterans Affairs Canada will not even entertain the idea until studies have been made. Studies have been conducted, and studies cost money. And who funds studies? Well, the government. So, it takes lawsuits like this. It takes this mass tort to create case law to allow for studies to be conducted in the first place. For them to be able to recognize quinism as an actual attributing factor to whatever mental illness that you're suffering. So Ireland was one that admitted it. The UK, all of our allies are on the right path. Canada is the only one. And what's hilarious is that people think that this is a political issue, but it's not. Every single party has been a part of this since the Somalia affair. So
as in we've gone through enough election cycles now that everybody's complicit, I think, in this problem at this point.
Yes, it's a complicity, and it's more than apolitical. Everyone's involved, and so no one wants to touch this hot potato. So what do you do with that? Same with the service dogs, right? No one, the Veterans Affairs does not want to touch that until there's data. But it costs money to create studies, to conduct these studies. Who pays for those studies? So is there a political will to invest money into it or not? That's
I think I don't have to be a mind reader to know where the guys in this studio stand on that. But I was remembering there was that young guy, veteran, who stood up at Trudeau Town Hall, and the question that was asked was, when you said that veterans were going to have to fight their government in courts to get the compensation that they deserved, which veteran were you talking about? Because he had given Omar Khadr the 10.5 mil. And here we find that there are no funds available to study this issue of quinism, even though we're the only country amongst our allied nations that still seems to be administering it. So it's pretty shameful, I guess. And well, not I guess, but it is. But the thing is, I think I read, and Mike, I think you're really kind of the one that's closest, probably most spun up on what's going on in the courts right now. But I was reading something about how the only thing it sounds like the government has even resolved to do at this point is to read studies from other countries about this. So is there any traction on that front in terms of actually getting the government to engage on this issue and fund the science, or where is that now?
Personally, I'd say the best bet for that right now is like what Sean started right in Alberta, was that Alberta then would look into the effects of quinism in not only in the veterans that serve, but in the civilian population that took holidays in St. Lucia or places that require a malaria treatment, right? And just to bring up, so like I was in Somalia, so I was there from the start kind of, but even though malaria was probably given out to some Canadian soldiers prior, like in the first Gulf War, right? But and it was Sean that I kind of followed it into the advocacy for Mefloquine, right? It was he shared this chart, right, which Dave, I think you got that from Dave Bona, Sean?
Yeah, correct.
Right. And then I redid it and added French. So I did a French and English video once with my daughter, because I can't speak French very well, right? But like on the chart though also, right? So you have 34 side effects for Mefloquine, right? And you have I think it's 19 for TBI and 18 for PTSD.
Okay.
And the thing with quinism is you're going to have, you might have only had PTSD, but yet you have symptoms of TBI, or you have a mixture of the both. So many times people think, oh, yeah, well, they should add this onto the list of PTSD or add that. But in reality, it's really coming from Mefloquine, most likely.
Right.
And Sean was kind of alluding to that earlier too, with the different ones, right? But yeah, so
Right.
And I think we can, like, with Alberta, so if other people are watching this and they advocate at the provincial level, so there is government money. There's just no federal government money. And what we have to remember is in Canada, that as an Albertan, my health care is paid for by the Alberta government. If you're from Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan pays for your health care. Every province administers their own health care. If, like we did in Alberta, we get provinces to recognize it, get that recognized in the legislation, have it a bill passed that says, yep, this is a real thing. Now, next year, when the government has grants, etc., we can apply, create a foundation, apply for grants, use those grants then to make the study. And it's important. It's actually the most important component for people advocating at a provincial level, is that they do not limit this to veterans, because there's oil field workers, humanitarian aid workers, missionary, people on a mission, all those people within Alberta that are potentially suffering from quinism and have no idea. So if the provincial governments are recognizing this, and they recognize that it's not just soldiers affected by it, we have a much stronger appeal for that provincial money. Federal money, not a fucking chance, because they're crooks. They know they're in the wrong. They've been trying to hide it since the 90s.
Yeah.
Provincial money, you got a chance.
Yeah, and
then create a provincial recognition, and then, I don't want to disclose too much, but Mike and I talked, like, starting a foundation would be a good idea. So if each province had a foundation for this, and each of those foundations coordinated, took money from provincial grants, even private money at that stage, and put it all together, now we can do that research. And I equate this to similar. You remember before Sidney Crosby and the NFL guys were talking about concussions? Concussions were not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, the NFL was denying everything. So then these rich players just got their own research. And that's how they got the research for concussion injury.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Got it.
The only problem is we don't make $2.5 million a game. So we gotta use our minds tactically and strategically, as we've been trained, to work the system. And at the provincial level is the way to work the system. Because when I advocated and told my MLA, he then disclosed to me that he took Mefloquine and that his wife has had long-term consequences since.
Wow.
So then there's a civilian that took it that is now affected and burdening the Alberta healthcare system. So the more people we find like that, the better off we are.
Right.
And I think that's where the advocacy now has to, especially that Alberta has laid it out. And the debate is an hour long. It's easy to watch and it's very informative. And they lay everything out that we're talking about here and they vote on it. And this was Conservative, or United Conservative Party, NDP, and I think that's all we have in Alberta in the House. But the whole House voted on this.
Nice.
Unanimously. So I think if that happened in Ontario, Quebec, BC, Saskatchewan, now we have the opportunity to tap into that money that's available through provincial governments.
Right.
So there is hope to find research. It's just we got to think with our recce hat on how to strategically execute this attack.
Right. And I think you have the right idea going to the provinces for the recognition first. And basically, once you do that, you make a good point with you're basically drawing a line between the pots of money here. And once the provinces recognize and start funding this, then it becomes a question of, well, where are you on this one, federal government? Because Veterans Affairs is a federal mandate. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's one of those things where, it's not just a battle, it's a war, and you're not going to win it all in one Hail Mary pass of a battle or anything. You got to be strategic, like you said, and you got to fight smart. I want to throw to a comment here, guys. Here's Karen Crawford saying, I was given mefloquine by Canadian government when working with Cuso in West Africa in 1992 to 1994. I was told it had been tested, was safe, and government would support me if I had problems with this drug. 30 years later, I have not heard from them ever. I can't say I'm surprised. We got to, you got to stay after them. And in my own experience, you really got to light a fire under people's asses sometimes when it comes to this stuff. But this touches on an interesting point here. And this is another one of these parallels when it comes to the issue of informed consent. And I'm just wondering how it was presented to you guys when you're in the field in terms of the known risks, or from what I read, it sounded like it was still under clinical trial when the Canadian government was given permission to use it, and they were supposed to clinically trial it, essentially. So were you guys told that you were taking part in a clinical trial in Somalia, for example, there, Mike?
No. So, I deployed to Somalia like Boxing Day, 1992.
Yeah.
And was there till I was there 7 months altogether. And all we were told was that the drug wasn't legal in Canada, and that whatever, that we were using it there. And I mean, nobody wants to go, nobody wants to miss a tour or whatever. But I mean, they were forcing people to take it, even though they were having serious side effects, like there, right? It was like, no, everybody's got to take it. And I think essentially, from 1992 until 2004, 2003, there was no other option but mefloquine. So say when Sean took it in 2002, he would have been under the same requirement I was in Somalia in 92, was that there was no other drug and you had to take it, right? It wasn't until, say, 2004 till 2009, I think, it was used 50% of the time by the Canadian forces in all their personnel, even though there was 3 drugs available altogether, right? Malarone, doxycycline, and mefloquine.
Okay. And I think I read that other militaries are basically using mefloquine as the tertiary go-to, as in like your third line of defense, whereas the other drugs that you named, they tend to go to them primarily because they're less harsh. Is that about right?
I would say, and I think, mefloquine's pretty much must have dropped off the edge and not really being used much. But say when this all started in 2019, I went into my Shoppers Drug Mart where I was and asked them if they had mefloquine, and they're like, no, but we can get it for you, right? It was still being used. And I believe it was in 2015 with John Dow and kind of like an alliance from country to country. They got mefloquine made into what they turned it into a black box, which means a drug of last resort. And that was 2015. And in the US, they can't sue their government. So instead, everything goes through their Veterans Affairs. And like Sean was talking about, Dr. Remington Nevin, and he was in the video there. He was at the mefloquine rally in 2019. And I think the years before that, but he's the lead expert in the States, and every week or whatever, he's getting people 100% or getting a disability claim for their soldiers for quinism, right? Some people he's getting like 100% disability claim for quinism. So meanwhile, our government's denying it, their government's actually approving it and say, yes, you have
the U.S.
mefloquine
government
toxicity, you have, quinism, right?
Wow. And we're still obstinate with respect to even performing the scientific studies necessary to confirm whether this is quinism or not. It's pretty shameful. And I'm curious to know, I'm curious to hear a little bit about Alex's experience and how it was presented to him, because he's kind of on the other end of the time spectrum here with respect to when he actually took it. So Mike would have taken it at around 92. And I think, Alex, you said it was more like 2010 for you?
2010, yes.
Yeah. And how was that presented to you? Was it, did they discuss the risks? And, I guess by that time, would it have gone through, it must have gone through clinical trials or something at that point. So I guess I'm just curious as to how it was presented to your group at that time.
Yeah, good question. I was a young man of 30 years old. I had no idea what Mefloquine was. I went through, so the way it was presented to me was during your, it was in the Y building, Y101 RCR in Petawawa, and you go and get all your immunization. It was basically the going through the carnival of getting everything done. So, I think I got about between 6 and 8 immunizations in one day. I remember having needles in every single leg. I think it was pretty much 2 in every leg. There's, yellow fever, you name it. Everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Then you just go from table to table to table, and I go to the next table, and it was the Mefloquine table, and it was a corporal, pharmaceutical technician, and she says, "All right, and they're doing what 300 soldiers in a day." So the bedside manner was not there, and it was just like, all right, just basically line up here, and here are your options. I'm like, what is this table? This is the malaria table. Okay, great. You have 2 options. I'm like, what are they? It's like, well, you have a daily or you have a weekly. I said, okay. And just in my head, I was like, a daily is going to be difficult for me to remember in a combat zone.
Right.
So I brought that up, and she's like, well, most people, and we're going to highly recommend that you take the weekly. And then most regiments do it on a Thursday or a Friday or a Wednesday or whatever the case may be on your admin day when you're pounding track or you're doing whatever, you're doing your resub. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Whatever, give it to me. And then she said, I asked, what are the side effects? I remember this specifically. And she said, you might get some nightmares. And I was like, well, I'm going to war. Those are the least of my worries. Sounds good to me. Is that it? She said, yes. Here's your pack. Here's your prescription. Oh, I didn't get the pack right away. Here's your prescription, and you go and get your full cycle for the entire tour. It's like, all right, sounds good. Thank you very much. That was the end of it. So I did have an option, but I was given no information. And part of the big ticket item for this mass tort is that they knew, or they ought to have known, the side effects. That to me, so when I found that out afterwards, and then I found out about Mike Rood and Sean's story and all these other people in this temporal time space that we're in, mind-blowing to me that was the kind of level of, I don't want to say incompetence, just this level of
you can let it out, man. I mean,
like wow, we signed the unlimited liability. As a combat engineer, I'm going to find the IEDs to allow the infantry to go and close with. I expect that you're going to give me the best kit and give me everything that I need to do my job. And if you knew, or you ought to have known, own up to it. It's all good. So that was my experience getting it. And then, of course, immediately you had to take it, I guess they were like, take it 2 weeks before deployment. So it's weekly, and I took it. And immediately I felt, crazy nightmares, anxiety out the roof. But once again, I'm deploying. This was my first deployment. I've never deployed to a combat zone before. So I'm like, these things obviously must be natural. And everyone around me who was in the same boat as me is like, yeah, right. And and of course, so you're using alcohol to kind of numb the tension before you deploy, and that's just the normal deployment kind of stuff. So everything was just chalked up to, well, this is what it must be like to go to war. And I continued to take it throughout, because one of the things I was told from my chain of command was that I did express some concern to my adjutant, and he was like, "Look, it's better to take this than to get malaria." And I said, "What happens if I get malaria?" He's like, "Well, then you've contradicted a medical order, essentially."
Right.
So if you contract malaria, they'll be like, "Well, were you taking the pill?" You say, "No, I wasn't taking the pill." Well, then you're facing disciplinary action.
Right. It's like a willful injury.
Yeah, exactly. Just like not wearing sunscreen, et cetera, et cetera. It's a self-inflicted wound. And so, given the experience that I had during that tour, that was really kind of just in the back burner in my mind. But it was only afterwards, hindsight 2020, that I realized what was kind of going on, given the diagnosis that I received and the symptoms that I have to this day. So it's been a fascinating thing. And then so when I first experienced, when I first discovered Mike Rood's journey, and Sean, online, I was like, wow, like I'm not alone. It was just mind blowing. So to have these symptoms be ignored by Veterans Affairs, and then you see all the other VAs of our allies actually acknowledging these things, including other stuff, like silica poisoning, and in any case, I won't go beyond the scope of Mefloquine, but it was fascinating to hear what my psychologists in the CFHS, Canadian Forces Health Services, were saying, and Veterans Affairs, and then my experience, and then to hear Dr. Remington and everyone else come out with their stories. And we're talking decades here. In 1990, when Mike deployed, I was 12 years old, and I deployed in 2010 at the age of 30, and it still wasn't addressed.
Yeah, that's the really kind of the shocking part about it, because there was so much time that had elapsed there. What are you talking? 18 years between those two deployments. And they still hadn't taken the lesson of Somalia. I say that often, especially in terms of the ethical culture that they talk about. But that's definitely another huge lesson, especially when we have all of our allies starting to acknowledge this now. You got to wonder why we are the holdouts. And I'll throw back to the guy who asked Trudeau which veterans he was supporting, that we wouldn't have to fight them in court. I'm going to go back to a share screen real here, just for something interesting in one of the articles that we were just showing here a minute ago. So this is basically the worst case scenario for quinism. This is the progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy, and so it's a viral disease. But the thing about it is the virus that causes it is already in the body. And when it becomes pathogenic, I guess, or malignant, it's usually due to a severe immunodeficiency. So that seems to be another thing that's associated with Mefloquine poisoning, is this immunosuppression that allows other viruses in the body that would otherwise be benign to start doing some real harm. And I thought this was very strange, actually. But here we have the treatment down here in June 2010. The first case report appeared of a PML patient being successfully treated with the anti-malarial drug Mefloquine with activity against the JC virus. So if that's not a real irony, then I don't know what is. But that's an interesting parallel, I think, to draw with the current crisis, because what I've been hearing out of everything in terms of side effects that we're seeing from the mRNA therapy is everything's pointing towards immunosuppression. And so we're seeing a kind of surgence of things like shingles from people who've recovered from chicken pox and things like that. So there's a lot of this stuff that's dormant in the body that the immune system is kind of handling. And because people are immunosuppressed right now because of the therapies they've been given, we're starting to see a lot of the symptoms manifest from some of these things. So that's kind of an interesting parallel to draw. Did any of you ever come across a case like that where somebody was so severely injured that they had that the PML, or like the really severe symptoms of I guess brain damage? Like, this is something that could result in brain damage, because they're saying it's whatever it is, pathy. So that's like something that continues to get worse. Are you guys aware of that in Canada? Is there much of that going around? Something that severe in terms of the immunosuppression or anything like that associated with quinism? That's not something you guys are familiar with? No? Okay. I was just curious. I thought that was
Sure.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel to draw, because everything we're hearing about the folks who are taking the therapy in the military is... Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So if I may, so once again, in Canada, here's the interesting thing, is that there's no way to draw that conclusion. So I myself had so I'll just go through my medical history. Why not? So I was medically released for PTSD and originally anxiety disorder. So anxiety disorder in 2012, but I still met the universality of service. I sought help. It took me 2 years. I was like, something is terribly wrong with me. And then I got help. But then maybe 6 years after that, I had to go back. And there was I first of all, in 2012, there was the stigma still existed. So me seeking help, and I'll give you a little personal story, is that I asked, so I'm at the CDU in Ottawa at the time, and the physician's assistant, the PA, sat with me, and I told him everything that was going on. And then, so essentially he said to me, "Do you put a shotgun in your mouth at night?" And I didn't know what to answer. I said, "Pardon me?" He's like, "Do you put a shotgun in your mouth at night?" I said, "No." He's like, "Okay, good. Because if you do, then we have a problem. But if you don't, get out of my office." So that's what I was dealing with. Okay. And that's in 2012 in Ottawa. Okay. In the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain. So fast forwarding, there's no way for, so let's just say somebody did have that type of symptom that you just described. They don't even have the mechanism. They don't have the ability to even point it in the right direction at all. So I was diagnosed with PTSD and then TBI, and I got CAT scans. I got all kinds of stuff that was going on, and they were just like, "Yeah, we don't know what this is. It's clearly not PTSD." Or it is PTSD. They didn't even know. They just basically give you a diagnosis that fits with whatever VAC will give you, and then you're on your way out, and that's that. It's just a very simple way to do it. So how many? So Canadian Forces specific, I guess, is how do you even identify that exists in personnel transitioning out or in? There's no data. There's no research. They won't even admit that quinism exists.
Well, and how are you going to deal with a problem when you won't even acknowledge it?
Yeah,
precisely.
Right. And thanks for sharing with us there, Alex. I know I've had just an insanely hard time with my own experience with CAF Health Services. And I've kind of said in this program, it's sort of my impression that they're not particularly interested in your health. They're more interested in administering the process that eventually leads to your release.
And if I may, I just want to say they came a long way between 2012 and 2018. They made strides.
I think so. Yeah.
Big time. But here we are now. It's 2022, and we have different issues.
Yeah, no kidding. And I guess I'll throw to Sean there, and I'll ask, was what your experience was like with CAF Health Services as well. And did you get a medical release?
Yeah, I was medically released in 04. So like way before Mefloquine was a thing. Arguably one of the first documented diagnoses of it because of one of the first medically released soldiers from Afghanistan for PTSD. I haven't even bothered asking VAC because I've been dealing with them for so long. I know exactly what they're going to fucking say.
Yeah.
And for me, it was until I got a provincial government to recognize that it's a thing. There's no, you don't even bother barking up that tree.
Yeah, they don't even have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, because you don't. And VAC's going to be like, did you fill out a CF98?
Yeah.
And when it came to like how we were given the drug in Op Apollo is like, they didn't even tell us we were taking Mefloquine until we got to Kandahar Airfield. We were formed up, the whole battalion. We were told, you're taking Mefloquine. If you don't take Mefloquine, you're going home. And if you are not taking it during the tour, you're going to jail. And I was like, so if I take this, I get to fuck shit up with the machine gun? Awesome. Yeah. Let's fuck it. I'll take this.
Yeah.
And then A company, the para company, which was basically 2 commando, all the NCOs that were in Somalia were formed up on their own and talked to by the battalion. And basically they were told, don't fucking bring up anything that happened in Somalia regarding Mefloquine.
No way.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And like I said, we were the second unofficial drug trial. So right away, tour ends. Like, awesome. Those guys went through. They didn't kill anybody. But I mean, I had a disciplinary incident with my Section 2IC. There are several other small incidents where soldiers that normally weren't prone to those things were making really bad decisions. A couple NDs, I think that could probably be related to Mefloquine.
Heard that.
And other than that, no one got malaria. Awesome. Use it. Issue it to all the troops going to Afghanistan.
Yeah. 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 You really got to wonder, like, the thinking that's driving that, especially when our allies are using it more as like the tertiary defense now, or maybe even around that time. Like, it seems like we've really been the worst at handling this drug. And I'll throw to Mike and maybe get a little bit from your experience there in terms of the response from health services and what it was like transitioning out.
I mean, like I knew I for myself, I knew I obviously had to have some kind of effects from, say, Mefloquine, but I was released for PTSD. I was diagnosed in 2012, say, with VAC, and then by 2014, then I was unable to work, and then I went on reserve force compensation for 2 years, and then was medically released in 2016. I was working for the Rangers in Gander, and everything was kind of coming unglued, right? And when John Dow and them were starting to do stuff at the start, I think around 2015, like with Dr. Remington Nevin and stuff, they had added me onto it, but at that point I was kind of like in survival mode, so I never I had to stop being involved with them, right? But nothing in the medical system really points towards Mefloquine, or and as Sean was saying, right, like if you're taking treatment for PTSD, that treatment's not going to be the same for what you need for Mefloquine poisoning, say, right? Where say they say antidepressants are actually worse for somebody that's taken Mefloquine, right?
Got it.
Myself, I spent 8 years on antidepressants, right, on 5 different kinds, right, and I went and I did a ketamine treatment, which was one treatment was better than 8 years of antidepressants, right? And they say after the time you're on your 3rd antidepressant, that you're at something like a 67% chance of relapse or suicide, right? So I was on 5. I mean, there's guys out there that have been on like 18 different drugs at one time, right? trying to get rid of one side effect from one pill to the next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, but there's been no support for Mefloquine, and right, so people are falling off the thing. They think they're being treated for PTSD when it's Mefloquine. They think they have a TBI, but it's Mefloquine, right? And people go through the cracks, and then that's it, right? So I mean, and there's been many cases, like I think it was in 2004 or 2006, somewhere in that time frame, out of Fort Benning, Georgia. They had 4 U.S. military members killed their wives, and 2 of them took their own lives, and it happened in the space of like 6 weeks. And the base did a big, okay, what just happened here, right? And launched investigations, and a lot of people were saying, look at Mefloquine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what kind of led, I think, the U.S. to slowly getting rid of it. They stopped using it, I think, with their special forces first, and then went on to the rest of their army, right? Meanwhile, Canada's still going full speed ahead. There was talk too with Lionel Desmond's with what went on there, that Mefloquine may have played a role in that as well. And those were some questions that were brought up in the inquiry last year. I was speaking to Cassandra Desmond a few times, talking about that.
Right.
And yeah, there's a lot of connections to it all, I think, right?
I got a comment here. It says ketamine is showing good results for treatment. Can anybody confirm?
Yeah, I mean, say it doesn't do anything for my insomnia. It kind of made it worse during the treatment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like for the anxiety and stuff, driving into Toronto, I couldn't drive into Toronto before 9 o'clock at night because, like Sean was talking about, the vestibular being overwhelmed by everything, all the traffic, right? Is nuts, right? But I did the treatment, and I can drive through Toronto. Doesn't matter what time. When do I got to be there? Okay, I'll see you there. It doesn't matter, right? Before I'd leave, come in at night, stay close to the event so that I didn't have to deal with the traffic, and now that's changed for me. So
it's good to hear.
It's helped in some parts, but they say that nothing will really fix it because it's done damage, irreversible damage, I think is what Dr. Nevin says. But I still think that you can limit the effects, the symptoms, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty darn hard on the old nervous system, which is kind of at the center of it all. I mean, if that's the kind of thing that you're suffering with there, then there's really kind of no repair for nerves available to you. There's really only the treatment, I guess, that they have to offer. So it is a permanent condition. I was going to throw back to Alex there too, because I know you're a little bit more recent, but I'm just wondering if there was any awareness of what Mike was just talking about there, with the need to approach this with a different roster of drugs than you would other mental health issues like depression and PTSD. What are you able to tell us on that there, Alex?
Yeah, my psychologist, who's VAC registered and is amazing, by the way. It's very to get one that is good is, from what I hear, very difficult. In any case, he told me about the ketamine treatments that were available. However, speaking with my case manager, she said, no, they're not. It all depends on which case manager you get and how much energy and thought process and mental bandwidth they want to put into these things.
Mm-hmm.
So ketamine I haven't had any experience with. However, personally, psilocybin has worked extremely well for me. Extremely well, and I don't use it daily. I use it maybe once a year.
So
But,
you're talking like microdosing, right? Like psychedelics?
yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
psilocybin is the magic mushroom, I suppose.
Yes.
You can use so microdosing is maybe 0.2, 0.1 grams every day, and just gives you a little bit of the psychedelic. It calms the nervous system.
Okay.
Right. So the nervous system is the key thing to focus in on here.
Yeah.
But psilocybin, depending on see, here's the thing: is that once again there needs to be data in order for it to be recognized by VAC, to basically allow the funding for it to exist. People have been using these things for a very long time. So for me, psilocybin once a year, hefty dose, very helpful. It allows me to experience things and think introspectively about everything that's been going on.
Cool.
Yeah, I can't explain it. There's no data. I just know that it's these natural medicines do exist.
Mm-hmm.
I had my share of the cocktail sock of pharmaceuticals that were given to me, and like Mike said, the antidepressants made it worse. All the pills that they gave me made it worse. I didn't last 8 months with them. I could not do it. I became a robot, an automaton. I could not do it. It just, my brain and my body rejected it. It actually made everything worse. And I was always told, well, you need to take it for years in order for it to, develop. But, serotonin is a beautiful thing. When you're taking these antidepressants, basically, it's almost like testosterone, right? You take testosterone, well, you don't build it anymore. So
Right.
natural remedies, alternative remedies are amazing things. They don't cost money. However, the government runs off money and runs off data.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, but that was my experience. Yeah. So ketamine, I looked into it. It's something that's not available to me. Maybe there's some resources out there that Mike could lend to everyone who's listening. Anyone who has a case manager or a VAC approved psychologist. If it helps, I'm all for anything that helps people relieve their suffering, because the system right now is not even recognizing what's going on.
Yeah, we can't wait for them to catch up. Mike, did you have something to throw in on that there about resources that might be available in that regard?
I went through Field Trip Health. It was covered by 4 veterans at the time. I know there's different ones. I think there's one opening up in Regina. I think some veterans looking at that. In Vancouver, Field Trip Health has one there. And there's one in Oromocto as well, Field Trip Health. And doing it the once was like, never had that kind of peace, like ever, I don't think. And it was like, a bomb could have went off outside the window and I would have been saying, I thought, where's the snacks? I thought I got snacks at the end, right?
That's the psilocybin?
No, that's the ketamine.
That's the ketamine.
Like,
okay.
At the end was like pretty relaxed, man. And it's the same, because ketamine was approved earlier, right? And psilocybin's coming in. But and then I think everything will shift towards psilocybin.
That's interesting. It sounds like it's probably something that's a lot less harsh, on the body than whatever they're cooking up in the lab these days. Especially in light of the way I was going to throw to a comment here. I think I lost it, but here we go. We got somebody here who says, I was kicked out. They're in the class action suit. I'll let you guys know how things go. The corruption will shock the country. So this is somebody who's just been recently released, presumably for not taking the jab, and they're part of the class action now. That's Valor Law. We just had them on here yesterday. More to follow on that. And I don't know about that corruption shocking the country. I don't know that there's much
We're way past that, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't think that we're going to be very shocked to hear what's going on inside the Canadian Armed Forces. I mean, I just left there last September, and yeah, I can tell you, I watched it get progressively worse right up until they brought in the critical race theory, and by that point, I was just like, I don't even think I can take this anymore, and just couldn't cope. Had to go to mental health services myself. I mean, I had had my mental health ticket punched a couple of times earlier in my career and stuff. So. But the way that it's being right now with the ruthlessness with these mandates and all of this commie indoctrination that's going on in there, my heart goes out to whoever remains because it's got to be rough. But I think we'll just go for some parting thoughts here before we go there, guys. And I thought I'd start with Sean because Sean, you really kind of sound like the longest serving veteran with respect to the fight to get Quinism recognized. So why don't you just start us off there with some parting thoughts?
Talk to your MLA and advocate for provincial health authorities to recognize Quinism. If you think you have Quinism, there's actually solutions and there's hope. You're not fucked. So don't put eating a bullet on the list of options anymore. And again, when you're doing your advocacy, make sure whoever you're speaking to, you mention the civilians that potentially could have taken this drug and are unknowns in your healthcare in the healthcare system. Because it's not just us that are suffering. And there's like a lot of civilians that took this, they're suffering. They have no idea why they're fucked up.
Right.
Because how can you get PTSD from a fun vacation in Vietnam for a year? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or Thailand, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess as a veteran, it's sometimes we like to bitch and it's like our God-given right because that's what we do. But we got to be grateful that at least we have some resources because there's a lot of people suffering from Quinism that got zero.
Yeah.
Advocate at your provincial level. If you got questions, reach out to me. My email is my first name as it is here, .lastname@gmail.com. And go from there because I think that's the biggest step that we can do to help this thing move forward. And I guess in closing is just stay close to your brothers. Like I'm in contact with Mike all the time. I'm in contact with other people all the time, especially in August for Patricia's in Afghanistan. It was a pretty tough month. So keep in touch with other veterans, like relate to the experience so that they know they're not alone in their thought process. And that for me is like, I can call Mike if I'm having a bad day. I just hear his voice and I'm like, okay, I'm having a better day. Because no matter what I say, this guy knows fundamentally how I feel. So we got to stick together and we got to help each other rise up. Yeah. Advocate at the provincial level, get a hold of your member of provincial parliament or MLA. And that's where we got to put the groundwork in.
Right on, brother. And I mean,
thanks a lot for having me here. It's awesome to talk about this, and I really appreciate it.
And you know what? We'd be happy to have you guys back anytime. I mean, I say it's not my podcast; it's our podcast. We want to provide these veteran perspectives and just get a platform for people to get these, for veterans to give their perspectives. Because even the independent media, they won't talk to us. Didn't really see them giving any interviews at Rolling Thunder, for example. I've been hearing from all kinds of people that they can't get replies from emails and all kinds of stuff like that. So we kind of got to be our own advocates. But I do think that peer support is probably the future, and that's kind of what you're talking about right now, is building a peer support network. And I think that's
the phone works both ways, man. You gotta reach out sometimes because you know how it is. That phone weighs 1,000 pounds. To pick that up and ask for help is tough. So, but keeping in touch, you'll be able to know how people are doing. In fact, just dropping Mike a line, I don't know if we want to I'll share this story with Mike and I dropped him a line one day and it saved his life, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and it's like, you know, reach out. That's important for us, especially the Afghan guys. Like, I don't mean to exclude anybody else from the process, but we got our own unique experience, especially in August. You know, it's tough watching the, you know, media be like, a year ago this happened in Afghanistan, and you're like, well, fuck, 20 years of my life for nothing.
Yeah, no kidding. I think we're all kind of feeling that with the current situation in Afghanistan. We got to wonder what it was all for. There's a lot of that going around in the veteran community, and I meant to highlight this earlier too, but you mentioned Tarnack Farm a couple of times, and just for anybody viewing this who's not familiar, that was the incident in 2002 where Major Harry Schmidt of the U.S. Air Force, despite the fact that he was told to hold his fire and that they were friendlies, he went ahead and released that bomb anyway, and he ended up taking out 4 Canadian soldiers who were training on the Tarnack Farm range in Afghanistan. So there was a whole courts-martial over that down in the United States and stuff, and it was a really big deal back in the day. And I know somebody else who was there too. I won't say it while we're live, but maybe you know him. And I do get what you mean when you say like the Afghan guys are kind of in their own sort of category in a way. Like it's with what's happening right now, and you know, this feeling of what it's all for and stuff like that. It's it's kind of a different, it's a strange sort of category of veteran. I don't know, but we're having a hard time. I'll say that a lot of us are having a hard time with everything that's going on. And Alex, I was going to toss that over to you, buddy, before I hog up all the airtime. I want to get your thoughts and any advice you might have on the way forward, and you know, for anybody out there that might be suffering in a similar way.
Yeah, thank you. And Major Schmidt was hopped full of uppers, by the way, doing way too many sorties. That was part of the whole thing. So anyways, little food for thought, little homework for people to go and research that incident.
Mm-hmm.
I was also in Tarnack, brother, in 2010, but not Tarnack Farms, Cop Tarnack, just a little further away. Deployed with 171 Cav Shadow Troop, the Americans, for the Obama invasion. In any case, advice for people: stick together, get after it, spread the word. But you know, one thing that has really kind of come to my mind over the last 2.5 years, because this Mefloquine mass tort started well before all of this, is that I care about not only veterans but people who are still in the Canadian Armed Forces very much. We all suffer now. To be asked to take something that you have no explanation, you're not given any explanation as to the consequences or the side effects of said drug. You take it because you're told to, and you do what you're supposed to. That's what we did. I don't know what's going on now, but there are people that are being released for the same thing. They're being 5F'd, or they're choosing for Charlie. This Mefloquine lawsuit is going to create case law, not only for everyone, 2 decades before today, but something is happening 2 decades forward of today. Keep that in mind. The government has our back, just like we have theirs. We signed the line of, we signed unlimited liability. They're supposed to take care of us and give us everything that we're supposed to in order to do our jobs. We have that trust. So may justice prevail.
Yeah, amen. And thanks for touching on that trust element there too. And I think the common theme that I hear amongst all of you is that you were sort of younger men and, you know, hard chargers and, you know, just willing to do whatever it takes to get the mission done. And it really is quite a betrayal, I think, to be administered this kind of a drug, knowing, you know, the risk profile, even years after, you know, we're talking like almost 20 years between Somalia and Afghanistan in some cases. So yeah, thanks so much for taking this up, guys. And it's really something I think that you know is like you say, it's going to set important case law so that hopefully generations of the future and maybe even currently serving folks who are getting 5-death and stuff like that might have an easier time being made whole once this whole thing is over. Yeah, that sounds really good, Alex. And over to Mike Rood. Mike, take us home, brother.
Just to, I mean, go to Karen Crawford's comment again, right? That's been 30 years, same as me, 30 years since Somalia, right? And we're still waiting, right? Still waiting for the government to acknowledge it or at least get treatment, right? Alberta's now our closest step, right, to getting towards there or funding it. You know, and like Sean was saying, starting a foundation might help get the research required, right? That Dr. Remington Nevin needs. The Legion even donated $25,000 to him in order to look at other veterans and stuff like that, people that are suffering. And yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing we have right now is our network of friends to keep us afloat, right? You know, when you haven't heard from that one for a while, maybe I better check, right? And sometimes those are the phone calls that save people, right, Sean? Right? From my own time, right? And you know, and then to go to just looking for his quick comment. Shoot. Chris Semchuk was talking about the people sitting in their basement by themselves, too ashamed to talk about it. I never saw nothing. I never went outside the wire. I did this, right? Who am I to claim anything? Well, no, man. We all have our own trauma, right? So, and 10 chances to 1, it could be because of Mefloquine, but you got to start somewhere. You got to get help, and don't compare yourself to somebody else. There's plenty of people that fit the category way more than any of us, right? But we all need help, right? Every single person. So it doesn't matter. Like, come out of your basement and start finding out what will help you and what will make you better, right? Like canned praxis, equine therapy, or ketamine or psilocybin or whatever, right? But until you start looking at what your problems are or what your symptoms are, and then try to mitigate the symptoms, life is probably not going to get any better for you, and you're just going to continue to sit in the basement like I did for however long, and then finally come out and don't want to go back in.
No,
right?
No, that's for sure.
So thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I really appreciate you guys being so candid and so willing to share with your own experience. And, you know, I don't suffer from quinism or anything, but I was medically released due to my mental health. And, you know, I did have to be medicated after my last tour for suicidal ideation and all that stuff. So, you know, I just want to kind of throw in, I guess, to say, to reinforce what you guys are saying. The thing is, though, that I found I was always kind of blaming myself. Like, I thought maybe I had a bad attitude, and I just needed to sort that out myself and get my head out of my ass. And it wasn't really until it got to the point where it was like, I just can't stop thinking about suicide, where I was like, and you know what did it for me? It was just that one frickin' slide that they give you when you're coming back from tour. It was at the end of my last tour in Iraq in 2019. And it's called the Road to Mental Readiness. And it gives you that spectrum from the green to the red. And I looked at the red and I was like, every damn symptom on that chart, I have it. And if it hadn't have been for that, I mean, I might have gone on thinking that it was still just kind of an attitudinal issue with me personally. But yeah, it's a real thing, folks. Like you just end up in this state of mind where you have this chain reaction, and you might need a pharmaceutical intervention just to break that chain and pull yourself back up out of the darkness. So, you know, a lot of times it's not the human mind can only take so much. We're pretty squishy organisms, and things like trauma, and I'll say moral injury too, because I think that's a very common component where we're sort of betrayed by the chain of command, health services, VAC, the government, and it has this kind of re-traumatizing effect over and over again, and that's something that I think we really need to bring to the fore of the discussion these days, is that element of the moral injury, because there's an awful lot of that to go around these days with our currently serving members, I would imagine. That's an issue that I think is near and dear in all our hearts. But with that, gents, again, thanks so much for being so candid. I think it was really productive, and I'm sure it helped a lot of folks that might have been watching today. And I really appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll be happy to have you back here anytime you want to come on and talk to us some more. So have a good night. Take care, gents.
All right, you too.
You too. Thank you. Take care.
Chimo.